It started like any other morning. The sun was still low, casting its early light through the curtains. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the paper, pretending everything was fine. That was my life, pretending. The kind of life where you wake up each day and go through the motions, hoping no one notices the cracks forming beneath the surface. But I noticed. I always did. My wife Sarah had been distant for months. At first, I chalked it up to stress from work, or maybe the weight of raising a family. We had a 5-year-old boy at the time, and things were tough. But over time, it became clear. It wasn't just stress. She was pulling away from me. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, like the gradual erosion of something solid. You don't notice the first few drops of water against stone, but eventually, the rock wears thin. I caught glimpses of it in the way she avoided eye contact, the way she'd lock herself in the bathroom for hours, phone in hand, always typing furiously. The way she became irritated with me for no reason, her tone sharper than before. But I ignored the signs. I wasn't ready to face what was happening. Then one evening, I came home early. I remember it vividly. I had just finished a meeting at work and decided to surprise Sarah. I thought I could take her out to dinner, maybe reconnect a little. But when I opened the door, the sight I saw shattered something inside me. She wasn't alone. My brother Tom was there, in our living room, his face flushed with guilt, her hair mussed in a way I'd never seen before. For a moment, neither of them noticed me. I stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding in my chest, unsure if I was seeing things correctly. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was unfolding before my eyes. But the reality hit too hard. I didn't need to ask what had happened. The scene spoke louder than any words could. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a slip-up. They had been together. And that knowledge, a sharp, painful knowledge, seeped into me like poison. "David, Sarah began, but I couldn't listen. I turned and walked out, the door slamming behind me, a sound that seemed to echo in my head. Tom didn't call. Sarah didn't call. They both knew. I had seen enough. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, heart full of rage and disbelief. The anger was all-consuming, but the confusion was worse. How could she do this to me with him? Of all people, why Tom? The betrayal stung in ways I couldn't explain, and I found myself wondering if I ever really knew her at all. I didn't confront Sarah or Tom right away. I needed time to process what had just shattered my world. The next few days passed in a haze. I went to work, came home, slept, but I was never really present. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was that I couldn't comprehend what had happened. Sarah had been distant for months, but I convinced myself it was just stress or the weight of our busy lives. I never imagined it would lead to something like this. The silence between us grew unbearable, and it became clear this wasn't a simple breakdown. She was pulling away from me, and I knew why, even if I didn't want to admit it. Finally, Sarah showed up at my apartment, uninvited. She was standing at the door, looking like a woman who had been through a storm. She had no idea how much worse things could get. "David, I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted this to happen. I never meant to hurt you." I couldn't look at her. "You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You betrayed me. With him. Of all people, why my brother?" "I don't expect you to understand," she said, wiping her eyes. "It wasn't about you or Tom. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake. Please, believe me." I felt anger rise in my chest, sharp and overwhelming. "You weren't lost. You knew exactly what you were doing. This wasn't a mistake, Sarah. This was a choice." My voice was colder than I intended, but I didn't care. "David, please," she pleaded. "I love you. I've always loved you. I'll do anything to fix this." "Do you love me?" I laughed bitterly, the bitterness thick in my throat. "Then why didn't you fight for us? Why did you throw it all away?" Her words tumbled out in a rush, desperate. "I know I've ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me a chance." I stared at her. The woman I had once loved didn't exist anymore. She was broken, and I couldn't fix her. Maybe I couldn't even fix myself. "I can't promise anything," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I'll try. For us." We went to therapy. tried to patch up the pieces. It wasn't easy. Sarah apologized constantly, but it felt like she was apologizing more for her guilt than for what she had done to me. But I kept pushing, hoping we could rebuild something, even if it was never the same. Then she told me she was pregnant. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to react. Was this a new beginning or a cruel trick? We had wanted another child before all this happened, but after everything I couldn't stop the doubt creeping in. The doctor confirmed it. We were having a baby, a daughter. I tried to be excited, to feel the joy that should have come with such news. But there was still a shadow, a question I couldn't shake, and when our daughter was born, perfect and tiny, I loved her immediately, but that shadow stayed, the doubt lingered. Moritz passed, but the doubt didn't fade. Lily was perfect, my beautiful daughter, but something about her felt off. I couldn't place it, but every time I looked at her, a small seed of suspicion took root. She had Sarah's eyes, but there was something else in her gaze, something I couldn't explain. Sarah noticed my distance. She became overly concerned, constantly asking if I was okay. I didn't want to tell her what I was feeling, but I couldn't lie to myself either. The questions in my head piled up. I started looking at dates. Lily's birth date didn't quite match up with when we'd conceived. The difference was small, but it gnawed at me. I tried to push it away, but the doubt stuck like a splinter in my mind. One night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo of Sarah holding Lily in the hospital. I studied it, trying to find any sign of what I feared. But everything looked perfect, too perfect. Then I remembered something Tom had said months ago when we'd been drinking. He'd joked about not knowing if Lily was mine or his. I had laughed it off then, but now, it didn't seem like a joke anymore. I couldn't let it go. I started tracking things, when Sarah was on the phone, when she'd leave the house. It became an obsession. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. One evening, I followed her. She said she was meeting a friend, so I waited until she left and trailed her car from a distance. She stopped at a park on the edge of town. I parked across the street, heart hammering in my chest. After about 20 minutes she came out, but she wasn't alone. Tom was with her. I watched them talk, standing too close. It was clear there was something between them, something beyond friendship. I didn't need to see more. My worst fears were confirmed. I drove home, dazed, replaying what I'd seen. I didn't confront her then. I couldn't. But the seed of doubt had rooted deep in my mind, and now everything felt like a lie. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Sarah, Tom, that look between them. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that I'd been blind, that the cracks had been there all along and I'd ignored them. My thoughts spiraled out of control. Was Lily mine? How could I live in a house where everything felt tainted? The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. I ate breakfast, talked to Lily, and tried to be a decent father. But inside, I was unraveling. Sarah seemed to notice my coldness, but she didn't ask. She just kept glancing at me, like she was waiting for something. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her. The days following were torturous. I couldn't focus at work. Every time I picked up my daughter, the thought crossed my mind. What if she wasn't mine? How could I ignore what I'd seen? The guilt was overwhelming. The love I felt for Lily couldn't be fake, could it? But if she wasn't mine, how could I trust anything else about our lives? I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. One afternoon, I drove to a clinic. I had to be sure, even if it meant destroying everything. The decision felt wrong, like I was betraying my daughter before I even knew the answer. But I couldn't let the doubt control me forever. The test was quick. The nurse gave me a small vial and instructions to bring it back. I barely said a word as I left. My hands were shaking. What was I doing? But there was no turning back. The question had to be answered. When I got home, I couldn't face Sarah yet. I couldn't look at her without hearing that whisper in my head. Is she lying? So I locked myself in the office and waited, watching the clock tick slowly. It felt like hours before the results came back. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The words on the paper hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't prepared for it. The test results weren't conclusive. The DNA was a match with mine, but there was a caveat. Lily's biological father was, in fact, someone else. My heart froze. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the paper, reading it over and over, praying for some mistake. There was no mistake. It wasn't my daughter. I sat in the chair, numb, as the world around me seemed to collapse. Everything I had believed, everything I had hoped for was gone. Sarah had lied to me again. But why? Who was the father, and why hadn't she told me? It felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open. The truth was out, but it only raised more questions. The Cliff's test results were still burning in my hands, the truth clear but unbearable. I couldn't face Sarah, not yet. My mind raced, but no matter how many times I tried to make sense of it, the thought remained. Lily wasn't mine. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my daughter, but not really. I tried to ignore it, but the weight of the truth crushed me. I could barely look at her without feeling the sting of betrayal. Sarah, however, acted like everything was fine. She kissed me in the morning, asked about my day, and smiled. I didn't know how she could do it. How could she pretend nothing had changed? I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't let it fester. The questions had to be answered, even if I didn't want to face them. I spent the day at work, my mind drifting in a fog. Every minute felt like hours. I couldn't escape the thought that Lily wasn't mine. How could I have missed it all this time? I had to know the truth. It was killing me. When I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming like she hadn't just shattered my world. I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked into the kitchen and set the envelope on the counter between us. Sarah looked at it, then back at me, confusion quickly turning to guilt. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. She froze. "David." "Who is the father, Sarah?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She looked down, tears welling up. "I didn't want you to know," she whispered. "I was scared." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Who?" She hesitated, then looked up at me. "Tom. He's the father." The words were like a slap. I took a step back, my legs unsteady. All those months of trying to rebuild, of pretending we were a family again, it was all a lie. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she continued, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake, David. I was lost, and I didn't know what I was doing." My heart pounded in my chest. "How long?" I whispered. "A few weeks before I got pregnant," she said softly. "I didn't want to hurt you, but it happened." I didn't know what to say. Everything I thought I knew about us, about our family, crumbled. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely audible, the pain too much to bear. "I can't live with this." The silence between us felt suffocating. I couldn't look at Sarah. I couldn't look at anyone. My mind was too full of chaos, and everything I thought I knew about our life had shattered. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, needing space, needing air. I paced around the house, every corner reminding me of what we had, what I thought we had. The pictures on the walls, the toys scattered on the floor, Lily's laughter echoing from the living room. It was all a lie. Sarah followed me, her footsteps soft against the floor, but I didn't want her near me. She was a stranger now, someone I didn't know. "David," she said, her voice pleading. "Please, talk to me. Please, don't walk away. I'm so sorry." I stopped and turned slowly, the anger inside me bubbling to the surface. "Sorry? You think sorry fixes this?" My voice shook with rage, but I couldn't control it. "You slept with my brother, Sarah. You carried his child, and you want to say you're sorry?" She recoiled as if I had slapped her, but I couldn't stop. The words had to come out. "You destroyed everything. You took away everything I believed in." I know I did," she whispered, her face pale. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't control what happened. I was confused, and I made the worst mistake of my life, but I love you. I still love you." The words hit me like a punch, but they didn't land. They didn't mean anything anymore. How could they? "I don't know who you are anymore," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it felt like a weight in the room. "You betrayed me. You betrayed everything we built." She reached out, but I stepped back. The hurt in her eyes was sharp, but it didn't change anything. She had done this. She had destroyed the trust, the family, and now nothing could put it back together. I don't want you to leave, she said, her voice breaking. I'll do anything to make it right. I don't care how long it takes. Please, just don't leave me. Her words fell flat. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to fix this. But I couldn't. Not when I knew everything I had loved was a lie. I need space, I said, turning away. I need to think. I didn't wait for her response. I couldn't. I grabbed my jacket, went out the door, and into the night. The air was cold, but it didn't matter. It didn't touch the fire burning inside me. I drove aimlessly, not sure where I was going. The city lights blurred past, and all I could think about was how everything had spiraled out of control. I didn't know if I could ever look at Sarah the same way again, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But I had to make a choice. I had to choose between the life I thought I knew and the reality that had been laid bare in front of me. And the longer I was away from her, the clearer the answer became. Can take my mind a blur, the roads stretching out in front of me like it would never end. The cold air outside matched the numbness inside. I didn't want to face the truth, but I knew I had to. I ended up at a bar, a place I hadn't been in years. It was quiet, dim, and exactly what I needed. I ordered a drink, not to escape, but to steady myself. I needed something to stop the world from spinning. The drink burned, but it didn't numb the ache. I kept thinking about Lily. She wasn't mine. Everything we'd built, every moment I thought was real, it all felt like a lie. I couldn't stop replaying the night I saw Sarah and Tom together, their closeness, their secret. I wanted to scream at Tom, to demand how he could betray me like that, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I couldn't even look at Sarah the same way anymore. There was no fixing this. I stayed at the bar longer than I should have, but eventually I left, unable to avoid the reality that awaited me at home. When I got there, the house was unnervingly quiet. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but there were no sounds of life. I called her name, but nothing. I walked slowly through the house, calling again, but only silence answered. When I reached the bedroom, I saw her suitcase by the door, half-packed, clothes spilling out. I froze. She was leaving. I didn't expect this. I thought she'd beg for forgiveness, but instead, she was running. Her footsteps approached, and I turned. She was standing in the doorway, eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry, David," she said quietly, voice cracking. "I didn't know what to do. I thought you'd want me gone." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. She was already gone in a way. The person I loved was a stranger now. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I finally whispered. "I don't know if I can trust you again." She nodded, tears still falling. "I understand. I've destroyed everything, but please know, I never meant for it to happen. I was lost, and I made the worst mistake of my life." Her words didn't change anything. They couldn't. I looked at her suitcase, then back at her. This was it. I had to choose, but in that moment, I didn't know what choice to make. She was leaving, and I didn't know who was left to stay. I didn't know what I expected to feel when Sarah left. But it wasn't this hollow emptiness. I stood by the door watching her pack, but I couldn't stop her. There was no point in asking her to stay. The damage had been done. She hesitated as she reached for the door handle. "David," her voice cracked, "are you sure this is what you want?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say yes, to tell her this was the end, that there was no coming back from what she'd done. But another part of me, the part I hated, still held on, still wondered if something could be saved. "I don't know anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want." She nodded and lowered her gaze, defeated. "I'm sorry. I've ruined everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I never should have done what I did." Her apology, though sincere, only pushed me farther away. She was sorry, but sorry didn't undo the damage. It didn't rebuild trust. With a final glance, she stepped out, the door clicking softly behind her. The house went silent. The silence was suffocating, and the emptiness that filled the space felt like it would swallow me whole. I spent the night walking aimlessly through the house. The pictures on the walls, once filled with memories, now felt like reminders of a life that was no longer mine. The laughter, the moments of happiness, gone. The man in those pictures wasn't the same anymore, and the woman beside him, she was a stranger. I stood in Lily's room, staring at her crib, now empty. Her toys were scattered across the floor, a reminder of the innocence I had believed in. I thought about how much I loved her, how much I wanted her to be mine. But now that truth was shattered. I didn't know who her father was, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get answers. The thought of confronting Tom again made my stomach turn, but I couldn't live in this uncertainty anymore. I needed to know the truth. Sitting in the dark, I realized something. This wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal, it was about me too. I had ignored the signs. I had let things go on longer than they should have. I had wanted to believe, to pretend that we could fix it, that everything could go back to normal. But it couldn't. It was over. The next morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Sarah's lies take everything from me. I would fight for Lily, no matter the cost. She was my daughter, blood or not, and I would protect her. I couldn't pretend anymore. It was time to take control. The morning felt different. The anger had settled, but something sharper had taken its place. Resolve. I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't let Sarah's lies define Lily's life. I had to take control for her sake. I spent the day making calls. The first was to a family lawyer. The conversation was brief but clear. I needed a legal path forward, even if it meant a painful court battle. I was ready for whatever it took. As I worked through the logistics, I tried to act normal. I took care of Lily, fed her, played with her, but every time I held her, doubt crept in. Was she really mine? I hated myself for even thinking it. The bond we shared, the love I felt, it all seemed real. But the doubt lingered, biting at the edges of my mind. What if I was wrong? That night after I put her to bed, I stood in her room. She slept peacefully, unaware of the mess her world was in. It hurt to look at her, knowing what I had to face. She didn't deserve this chaos. She deserved a chance at a life free of doubt, free of betrayal. I couldn't keep questioning myself. I had to act. The next morning, I called Tom. I didn't want to, but I needed answers. His voice was steady when he picked up. "David," he said, already knowing why I was calling. "Are you the father?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. There was a long pause before he answered. "Yeah, I am." The words hit me like a punch. There it was, the truth. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, relief. It all mixed together, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and now I had to deal with it. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. I hung up, feeling numb. Tom, my brother, was the father. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything crash over me. It was done. The questions were answered, but the damage was done too. Now, I had to figure out what came next. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep pretending. Something had to change. The next few days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Tom, my brother, the father of my daughter. The weight of that truth crushed me every time I tried to think about it. I couldn't escape the sting. I focused on Lily. She was small, innocent, and I held her close, trying to give her some semblance of normalcy. But I wasn't sure how to protect her from this mess. How could I keep her safe when my own world was in ruins? I went through the motions, work, home, sleep, but it all felt meaningless. My mind kept returning to Sarah, to Tom, to the life we once had. I knew I had to keep moving forward, but I didn't know how. Then, one afternoon, Sarah called. My hand trembled as I stared at the phone. The last time I saw her, she was walking out the door, leaving me. Now, she was reaching out again. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. "David," she said, her voice fragile. "I know you're angry, and I know I've ruined everything. But I need to talk. Please, let me explain." My first instinct was anger. After everything, now she wanted to explain? I didn't know if I could handle hearing it, but I picked up the phone anyway, because a part of me still needed some answer, some closure. "I don't think I can do this anymore, Sarah," I said, the words sharp. "You tore everything apart. You lied to me. Now you want me to trust you again." "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I was confused. I was lost. I didn't think about the consequences until it was too late." "Too late?" I snapped. "You've ruined everything. You've hurt me in ways I can't explain." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David. But I still love you. I still want us to fix this." Her words felt hollow. How could she say that after everything? The woman I loved was gone. I wasn't sure who was left in her place. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice cold. "I don't know if I can forgive you." There was silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. "I'll leave you alone, David," she finally said. "I'll give you space to figure this out, but just know, I'll always love you." The line went quiet, and I stared at the phone, feeling empty. The truth was out, the damage was done, and I didn't know what came next. The days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. I spent more time alone, thinking, questioning everything. I tried to focus on Lily, tried to pretend everything was fine, but it was impossible. I couldn't escape the truth, couldn't stop the images of Sarah and Tom from playing in my head. I couldn't let it go. The betrayal, so deep, so close, haunted me. It wasn't just that she slept with Tom. It was that she lied to me for months, manipulated me, pretending everything was normal. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. But Lily, she was my priority now. She was all that mattered. The uncertainty about her paternity gnawed at me, but I couldn't let it consume me. She was my daughter, no matter what, and that meant everything. I needed to make sure she was okay, that she was safe, and that whatever chaos her mother had brought into our lives wouldn't touch her. One evening I made a decision. I couldn't let Sarah slip away from responsibility. I couldn't let her walk out of our lives and leave me to pick up the pieces. I'd tried to give her space, to let her figure out her mistakes. But there was nothing to fix. It was too late for that. I found the number of the lawyer I'd spoken with earlier, my fingers shaking slightly as I dialed. The conversation was quick, but direct. I needed to make sure I could protect Lily. I couldn't trust Sarah, not anymore. After the call ended, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was the only choice left. I had to fight for Lily, fight for her future, even if it meant facing Sarah in court. That night, I watched Lily sleep, her small chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. She had no idea what was happening in the world around her, and I hated that she would eventually have to understand the mess we were all in. But for now, I would protect her from the storm. In the silence of the room, I realized there was no turning back. The family I had known was gone, and now it was time to rebuild, even if it was from the ashes. For Lily, I would fight. For her, I would make sure this didn't break her. Tomorrow, I would take the next step. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I spent my time meeting with lawyers, gathering whatever evidence I could find, trying to make sense of everything. The legal route was my only option now, and though I hated that it had come to this, I knew there was no other choice. If I didn't act, I would lose my daughter. Sarah wasn't calling anymore. I had stopped answering her messages, stopped responding to her pleading. I couldn't deal with it. The guilt she seemed to want me to carry, guilt for her mistakes, was not mine to bear. I had already carried the weight of her betrayal, and it was enough. I wasn't sure how she'd react when she found out I was moving forward with a custody battle, but at that point, I didn't care. I had to do what was best for Lily, and if that meant fighting for full custody, then that's what I'd do. One afternoon, while I was sitting with the lawyer, I got a message from Tom. I didn't know why I still had his number, but there it was, his name flashing on my phone screen. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I hit open. "I know things are bad right now, and I get it if you don't want to talk," the message read. "But we need to figure this out. It's not just about Sarah anymore, it's about Lily." I stared at the message, my hand tightening around my phone. I wanted to throw it against the wall. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had ruined everything. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and put the phone down. Lily was in the next room, playing with her toys, oblivious to the chaos around her. I walked over to her and scooped her up, holding her tightly in my arms. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I allowed myself to feel peace. She was mine. No matter what, she was mine. I stood there holding her, thinking about the future. This battle wouldn't be easy. It would hurt. But I couldn't back down. I would never back down when it came to her. As the lawyer's office prepared the paperwork, I made one final decision. I would not let Tom or Sarah dictate what happened next. This was my fight, for Lily, for her future. When the court date came, I would be ready, and whatever it took, I would make sure Lily would grow up in a world where she was loved, safe, and above all, protected from the lies that had nearly destroyed everything. The days before the court hearing were a blur of preparation and uncertainty. I focused on gathering everything I could, messages, dates, any evidence to strengthen my case. But even as I worked, a gnawing emptiness lingered. This wasn't how I imagined my life. My daughter wasn't supposed to grow up in a world like this. I kept my distance from Sarah and Tom. Their attempts at reaching out faded, and I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I had to protect Lily, even if it meant shutting them out completely. One afternoon, while making lunch for Lily, I heard the front door open. I looked up to see Sarah standing in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. "I need to talk, David," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "Please." I felt a surge of frustration. What was there to talk about? "You've made your choices," I replied, my voice hard. "Now I'm making mine." She stepped into the kitchen, her eyes searching mine. "I know. I've said I'm sorry, 1,000 times maybe. But I don't want to lose her. I can't lose Lily." I stared at her, disbelief rising in my chest. She was still trying to make me feel guilty. "You lost her when you betrayed me, when you lied to me for months. This isn't something you fix with an apology." Her eyes welled up, but I felt nothing. Not anymore. "I know I've ruined everything, David, but I love her. I love both of you. I just need you to understand that." "You don't get it, Sarah," I said, stepping back. "You can't just walk back in and pretend things are okay. You don't get to undo what you've done." She stood there, trembling, as if waiting for me to change my mind. I couldn't. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she whispered. "Just, please don't take her away from me." I stared at her, then at Lily, playing in the other room. The choice was clear. "You don't decide that anymore," I said, my voice firm. "This is about Lily now. I'll protect her. I'll make sure she's safe." I turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, broken. She had no one to blame but herself. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about my daughter, and I would fight for her. Day of the hearing arrived, and I felt the weight of it all. Lily's future, my future, and the mess that Sarah and Tom had created. I couldn't focus on anything except the reality that this was it. This was the moment that would determine what kind of life my daughter would have. I sat there, my lawyer by my side, while Sarah sat across the room, pale and quiet. I hadn't spoken to her since the day she left, and I had no intention of doing so now. She looked broken, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Tom wasn't there. I hadn't expected him to be. He had made his choice the moment he betrayed me. I didn't know if I'd ever confront him about it. For now, I had one focus: Lily. The judge called the court to order, and I felt my heart race. The lawyer spoke first, outlining why I should have full custody. Every word felt heavier than the last. I couldn't look at Sarah. I wasn't sure if I could, if I wanted to. Then her lawyer stood up. He painted a picture of Sarah as a loving mother, capable of providing a stable home. But I knew better. She hadn't been stable. She'd shattered everything we built. How could anyone claim stability after what had happened? The hours dragged on, and all I could think about was Lily. Was she scared? Was she too young to understand what was happening? My thoughts kept returning to her, but I couldn't afford to let them distract me. It was my turn to speak. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the stand. Sarah's eyes were on me, and I refused to meet them. I couldn't. I had to be strong. "I'm asking for full custody because I need to protect my daughter," I said, my voice steady. "I want her to grow up in a safe, stable home. I can give her that." I paused, gathering my thoughts. I'm not trying to erase Sarah from her life. She's her mother. But I can't ignore what happened, what they did. I can't let my daughter live in a house built on lies. I turned towards Sarah, her face a mask of pain. I didn't want to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't help it. I looked away quickly. I couldn't let her manipulate me. "I love Lily. She's my daughter, but I have to protect her. If that means keeping her away from Sarah for now, then that's what I'll do." I returned to my seat, heart pounding, unsure what would happen next. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur, lawyers speaking, the judge asking questions, but my mind was focused on one thing: Lily. I didn't know how this would end, but I was doing everything I could to give her a future without betrayal and lies. The decision came a week later, and I tried to prepare myself, even though I knew I couldn't. I spent those days obsessing over every detail, every word spoken in the courtroom, every argument made. I tried to keep my distance from Sarah, from the messages she kept sending, asking for another chance to talk. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend that anything would ever be the same. When the call came, I was sitting in the living room, Lily playing at my feet. I stared at the phone, unsure if I was ready for what I knew was coming. Finally, I answered. "Mr. Donovan," the lawyer said, "the judge has reached a decision." My heart skipped a beat. I braced myself for whatever would come next. After a long pause, the lawyer continued. "The court has granted you full custody of Lily. Sarah will have supervised visitation. The decision was made based on the circumstances and the well-being of your daughter." I let the words sink in. Full custody. It was what I wanted, what I needed, but hearing it confirmed made it real. I felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly followed by a sharp ache. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Lily wasn't supposed to grow up in a world torn apart by lies and betrayal. But this was the reality now, and all I could do was make sure she had a chance at happiness and stability. I hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the walls, the weight of everything hitting me all at once. I wasn't just a father now, I was a protector, and I would do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant keeping her away from Sarah, at least for now. Lily tugged at my sleeve, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Daddy, look," she said, holding up a drawing she'd been working on. It was a picture of us, her, me, and a big heart. I smiled, taking it from her and kissing her forehead. "This is beautiful, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled, proud of herself. "I made it for you." As I held the drawing in my hands, I realized something. No matter what had happened, no matter how much had been destroyed, I had her, and that was all I needed. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift just a little. The battle wasn't over, and there were still days ahead of uncertainty. But with Lily by my side, I knew I would be okay. We would be okay. And no matter what came next, I would never let go of the one thing that mattered most. Her.